Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this very important meeting of the Taliban Political Commission under the leadership of Mullah Abdul brother. They met the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. They also met the DG ISI General Faiz, and also met the Foreign Secretary in the Foreign Office today. And it was a very important meeting because earlier they had visited Russia, China and also Iran. And this was the fourth country on the tour. And interestingly, now when we talk about the stalled process, obviously since Pakistan has committed a lot, so even now the stance of Pakistan was that they have agreed on the Afghan peace process, and they'll make sure that all the efforts should be made in order to restore peace in Afghanistan. Peace for Afghanistan is not only important for their local people, but for the entire region, and in particular for Pakistan. Now, when we talk about the current understanding, now there was this very important statement from the spokesperson of the Taliban, and he said that now the Americans need to initiate the peace process, and we are ready to talk on all the major issues. And interestingly, a lot of people were thinking that Zalmay, Khalilzad, who was present in Pakistan, he came on Tuesday, and this delegation arrived today, and they were holding this meeting today, that there is a possibility of a meeting between Zalmay Khalilzad and the Taliban delegation, or maybe with Mullah Abdul brother on one-on-one. They have had a couple of other meetings also when they had met on one-on-one, but this time it did not take place. Now let's see where it moves. You can call it stalled, but it's not over yet. Maybe there is a lot of problem as far as the certain issues regarding the withdrawal is concerned. I'll just give you a very brief and interesting example that when you look at the numbers, if you remember, by the end of 2011, there were around 100,000 troops, and in December 2000, 46,000. And then, since there was a constant reduction in 2014, there were 16,000. By the end of 2015, by the end of 2014, actually, Barack Obama was the president, and he said that we'll withdraw all the troops. It did not happen. Eventually, in 2014, 9,800 was the number they were placed, and eventually, Donald Trump again announced that we need to send more fresh troops there, basically to look after the administrative issues and also to guide and to train the Afghan soldiers. So eventually, the number came up to 14,000. This is what we have at the moment present in Afghanistan. But let's see, when they talk about withdrawal, what exactly do they have in their mind? We will introduce you to our guest, but before that, let's watch this report. After the report will come, we'll introduce you to our guest, and then we'll start a panel discussion.
Pakistan and the Taliban militant group urged the peace talks in Afghanistan must resume as soon as possible. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said both sides agreed on the need for the earliest resumption of the peace process. Zalmay Khalilzad, the top US envoy involved in the peace talks, also visited Islamabad for talks with the government. The United States has long considered Pakistani cooperation crucial to efforts to end the war in Afghanistan. Last month, President Trump halted talks with the group aimed at striking a deal for the US and other foreign troops to withdraw in exchange for Taliban security guarantees after it carried out a bomb attack in Kabul that killed 12 people, including a US soldier.
When I heard, very simply, that they killed one of our soldiers and 12 other innocent people, I said, there's no way I'm meeting on that basis. There's no way I'm meeting.
The latest development follows a meeting last week between Trump and Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The Taliban have refused to negotiate with the Afghan government, dismissing it as a US puppet. Taliban officials have in recent days visited Russia, China and Iran.
Welcome back. Now, let me introduce you to a panelist. We have with us in our studio. On my right is Ambassador Shahid M.G. Kiani Saab, is a senior diplomat, so thank you very much. We have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, the senior defense analyst, sir, thank you very much. And we have with us Atiq Rehman Saab, who's a foreign affairs expert. Atiq Saab, thank you very much for joining us in our show. Now, sir, the Taliban delegation, this political commission, primarily of Doha, they met the foreign minister today, along with the Foreign Secretary Suhail Mahmood Saab, and also Lieutenant General Faiz who is the DG ISI. Now, three very important persons, they met held a very important meeting today in the morning in the Foreign Office in Islamabad, about a few furlongs away from us. Now, interestingly, sir, when you talk about this meeting, I went through almost all the details of the Foreign Office. Nothing concrete, I mean, no major points in particular were disclosed that these were the areas which came under discussion. It was a general kind of paper which was later on provided and that said, oh, well, Pakistan supports the peace process, they've agreed to carry on with this effort, and it was very generic basically, sir. Your take on it?
First of all, please try to understand that the discussions which have been going on for the last many months in Doha, Qatar, are very sensitive in nature. You can see the sensitivity from the fact that President Trump, just few hours before these Taliban leadership was to arrive in Washington DC, possibly, they say Camp David, it was called off because of certain reservations of the United States. The other aspect is that the Taliban leadership, you see how they are political savvy people. They understand the dynamics. Earlier you could see Saudi Arabia playing a very prominent role. Now the geopolitical dynamics has changed. The Taliban have gone to China, to Moscow, and even to Iran. Can anybody imagine, as they say, politics makes strange bedfellows, that the Taliban leadership has been in touch with the Iranian leadership? They understand, because Iran has a very important stake in the stability of Afghanistan. So they understand, even though the United States may not like it, but the Taliban are in touch, in close contact, consultation with China, the Soviet Union being the power with which the Taliban have been at odds, and Iran. And they have come to Pakistan. Pakistan has played a very pivotal role. This discussion which is going on, which went today, is a continuation of Prime Minister Imran Khan's discussion with President Trump and other leadership. And we are now, I think the first round, which I understand, would be just to listening to them what the Taliban want to tell the Pakistan leadership.
Now, Ambassador, if you remember, in one of the interviews in USA recently, the Prime Minister Khan said that the Taliban leadership approached him and they wanted to meet him. But he said that since I called Ashraf Ghani, the president of Afghanistan, and he told me not to meet him, so I did not. Now, I fail to understand now, these are the two main contestants, whether he's going to become the next president or maybe Abdullah, who's the chief executive officer. Do you think, sir, the narrative within the, I would say, within the corridors of power in Afghanistan is clear? Do they exactly know what do they want to do? Because we always say it should be Afghan-owned, Afghan-led. Practically, is this Afghan-owned and Afghan-led kind of a procedure, sir, we are following?
At this time, it is not, because the Taliban are a extremely important stakeholder in the dynamics of Afghanistan, but they are not the only stakeholder. Now, my opinion is that the government of Pakistan, both the political and military leadership, is aware of what's happening. But I think it will be wise as not to give in to the demands of the Taliban. We want a peaceful, politically stable, economically vibrant Afghanistan, with everybody being on board, including President Ghani and his party, because maybe they constitute, say, 20% of it. What blunder had been committed in the past was keeping out the Taliban, the Northern Alliance out, and the ethnic minorities, and the Taliban ruling the government. Now Afghanistan has changed. The last 19 years Afghanistan has changed. If Afghanistan is to be stable, politically stable, I think the Taliban are to be advised in their own interest. Would they want to govern in Afghanistan and carry on with the civil war which happened? I've been to Afghanistan, I can tell you what impact the civil war had on the people of Afghanistan. Because Pakistan wants the Afghan refugees to go back, a politically stable Afghanistan and peaceful Afghanistan, because a lot of our projects are stalled because of instability in Afghanistan for the last now many years, many decades. So it will be important, and let's hope sanity prevails among the leadership of Afghanistan, of Taliban, that they want to carry with them the other people of Afghanistan who are, and there are many Afghanis who wants to come back to Afghanistan. They are spread around the whole world. And they are, believe it or not, praying for stability and peace to come to Afghanistan. So let's hope that our leadership has also told them, they are very clever people, Taliban, but if they want to have their way only, that only they will govern, that will be a very big blunder.
So power sharing seems to be the ideal sort of a situation where the two are equally happy, like the win-win situation as we call it, sir. Avim Saab, now 2 points. They're very important. One is that, let's assume for a moment that Abdullah, who claimed that he has won the election, and let's suppose the second round is not held, and he's declared as the next president of Afghanistan. Now, this man has a history. This man was always anti-Taliban. He hails from Panjshir, but primarily he's declared that he is from Kabul and is a Pashtun. But obviously he has a Tajik background too. He was very close to, if you remember, the leader of the Northern Alliance, Ahmad Shah Massoud, when he was murdered, right, few days right before 9/11, if I'm not wrong. Things changed. And then there was this totally different ballgame altogether, what we witnessed in the last almost 19, 20 years in Afghanistan. This man, once he's in power, do you think he's going to carry on with this kind of negotiation with the Taliban? Or do you see, if not, the entire Afghanistan, or rather those areas which are in control of the Afghan Taliban, they'll be the troubled areas then?
Well, one thing is for sure that peace cannot come to Afghanistan unless the Afghans themselves sit down, or there is intra-Afghan dialogue, and they decide to share power and agree with it, and only then there will be peace. Now, it is said that whereas every Talib is a Pashtun, every Pashtun is not Talib. And while Taliban may be controlling 65-70% of territory, they are maybe around 45% of the population, and out of that, around maybe 35 to 40% is pro-Taliban. So if
Tajik, could be Uzbek, could be Saudi,
Yes.
could be from Yemen, anywhere.
So if they have a population backing of 35 to 40%, they themselves have said they do not like to monopolize our power. Taliban have stated this. So there will have to be a power sharing arrangement. Either it's Ashraf Ghani or it's Abdullah. And they'll have to share power with Taliban. And Taliban will have to contend with it. And only then there can be peace. That is what the Americans want, that is what Pakistan wants, that is what the entire region wants. So there will have to be a power sharing arrangement. And I think the major focus of all efforts going on either by USA, by Russia, China, Iran or Pakistan is to bring about an agreement between the various stakeholders, basically the Kabul government and Taliban, wherein they agree to have a power sharing arrangement. And probably it is one of the stumbling blocks within the the process of the various rounds that that have been held between Taliban and the Americans. While the Americans may be saying that they killed one American soldier and hence they called off and they withdrew the invitation to Taliban to
Sir,
visit
almost
Camp David.
2,400 American soldiers have been killed so far since the Americans invaded Afghanistan. 2,400, that's a huge number.
So out of killing of just one soldier, they call off a very valuable process.
That's not a very legitimate reason.
Yes. And I think that was to bring about pressure on Taliban and maybe to appease the Kabul government to an extent, because Kabul government was always apprehensive of whatever was going on because they were not part of it. And of course, there was an election going to be held. And if the, in my view, if the election, if the negotiations get stalled, they feel it is strengthened and maybe there is greater voter sympathy and hence there is greater turnout and of course the possibility of the current regime getting more votes will become more. And
So only 21% people voted.
yes.
Last time it was over 9.5 million. This time it was 2 2.119 to be very
While
exact.
you see, we may suspect the legitimacy of this election, but the fact remains that the Americans are backing it. The entire world is backing it. And while even the previous government was recognized by the entire world, and even this is going to be recognized by everybody. So they de jure, they are the, whosoever comes into power, he is the head of the government in Afghanistan. So I think whatever be the number of or percentage of turnout, this will be considered and accepted and acknowledged as a legitimate government, a legitimate political dispensation. So that is what gives more strength and credibility to the Kabul government to feel strong and be demanding a negotiation or be part of the negotiation with the Taliban. So that makes them very relevant in any peace process, and Taliban, come what may, will have to accept them as such, will have to negotiate with them, will have to share power with them. And I think that is what is the major stumbling block, as I said, between the entire process. Whereas the Americans, of course, have put up certain conditions that they like to continue to maintain some presence. That may be one. But the fact remains that this is the major stumbling block. And Pakistan has also already stated that it is going to mediate between the two sides, the Kabul government and Taliban, wherein there is a direct negotiation and there is some sort of a settlement and agreement. And if that does happen, I think we will be much closer to peace than what we are today. And presence of the American delegation in Pakistan at the same time, of course, is increasing the prospects of their direct contact and advancement in the peace process, and maybe another round of negotiations possibly in Pakistan.
All right. Now, talking about the Taliban, they have very clearly mentioned one thing, again, referring to their spokesperson. He says that if America would take some initiative, we would be ready to talk to them. So maybe when you talk about Zalmay Khalilzad, who was present in Pakistan, the delegation, and their head was here, Mullah Ghani brother is one of the senior most. But earlier they have met on many occasions, but this time they could have met, but they did not. Do you believe that the Taliban now maybe believe, because it was always about the trust deficit, if you remember, that, you know, the Americans do not have a great history when it comes to negotiations, and eventually, if you look at P5+1 even, you know, everybody endorsed it, everybody supported it, it was done, and certainly the Americans backed out. Over here, since it's a solo deal with the Americans, so you believe that the Taliban now are practically talking from a position of strength, and they have shown their strength in the recent days also. And especially if you see there's a fragile government, a new fragile government, let's suppose whoever XYZ comes into power, there is going to be a lot of problem. And now the Americans need to also understand that if they are serious about bringing in peace in Afghanistan, talks are a compulsion, and they need to sit and sort it out on ASAP basis, sir.
Thank you so much. For me, it's a very difficult and very complicated position. On one side, the Americans are very much interested to stabilize this region by installing or generating the peace in Afghanistan. But on the other hand, the changing geopolitics dynamics of this region is also a factor which we cannot ignore. I mean, the Russian role in the politics, the Chinese economic rise, these are the factors which will not let the US to leave this region, or we can say the probability of the American engagement in this region is very high. So they will increase their engagement in this region. And when we associate the question of peace with Afghanistan, then we have a very ambiguous position. I mean, there are a number of efforts initiated by international community. There are a number of players involved many times to generate the peace in Afghanistan, to address the question of stability in this region. But without meeting some prerequisites, we cannot initiate or we cannot achieve the desired results of the efforts. I mean, everyone knows there are some elements in this region which are in not favor of the peace in Afghanistan, because ultimately everybody knows the peace in Afghanistan will leave positive impact on Pakistan, and it will be in favor of the whole region. So the problem is the peace in Afghanistan will definitely create a sufficient place for Pakistan to enhance its vision of peace and stability in the region. So we need to understand the prerequisite steps. I mean, what are these factors? We need to root out them. So
And
then
those
after,
are, for example?
for example, Indian-Afghan policy, the Indian role in Afghanistan, everybody know. And on the other hand, the strategic relation between US and India. So we need to understand these the scenarios.
So you believe that if Dr. Abdullah comes into power, becomes the next president, obviously he has very close and I would say even personal ties with the Indians, the role of the Indians would definitely increase in Afghanistan, resulting in more problems and more miseries for the Afghan people. And that means that, again, Pakistan is going to be blamed if the Taliban, they attack someplace in Afghanistan or something happens elsewhere. So you see primarily what I've understood that as long as the negotiations are not meaningful, as long as the engagement is not with full heart, the results won't matter then.
Exactly. The change in the government will not let Afghanistan to manage escape from the great power politics. That's my analysis. So Afghanistan is the focus point of the great powers. So Russia, China, US, they are in.
But alignments have changed. Don't you think the role of China and Russia should multiply now? The Americans, their presence is there. They have a strategic importance, obviously. They do understand the dynamics of the region also, plus the Indian role, plus the Iran issue, plus Pakistan for that matter, and the Central Asian states, and China on one side, even India, and then Russia. Why would they leave? They've spent trillions and trillions of dollars to be here, and they've been able to survive, I would say, for almost 2 decades.
This is what I am saying. The question of peace is on one hand, but on the other hand, the great power politics. We cannot ignore the great power politics. The United States will not let any other power to increase its influence in this region. And Afghanistan is the only one factor which fascinates the great powers.
All right.
So that's a very complicated situation.
All right, now over to you, sir. Ambassador, now it seems if Ashraf Ghani is into power, he has been there in the last term also, so what difference will he make? That is one of the primary reasons of the low voter turnout, sir. This is what most of the people are thinking, that, what difference will it make?
Yeah.
People are more concerned about that concept of roti, kapda and makan, The food, food is not available. Look at the medical conditions. Look at the other, there is no infrastructure as such in Afghanistan. Look at their economy. The list goes on and on. But now, sir, Afghan people are practically living a very miserable life, sir. We always talk about Kashmir. Over there, things are even worse in certain areas. At the same time, there is no hope for peace in the region. There are different factions within the Taliban, then there is a government, then there is a government within a government, and then we call it like the Afghan owned and led, whatever dialogues we talk about, but it's always under the influence of the Americans. So there seems to be a very complex role of India again. You can't rule that out. And obviously, as long as the eastern border really doesn't boil, the western border is going to keep getting hotter because of the Indian presence, and that is going to be another problem for us.
Let me start with this Indian factor. In any future discussion between Pakistan and India, like the composite dialogue, whenever it takes place, I can tell you the most unpredictable neighbor you have in your region is Afghanistan and not India. Look at the history of our relationship with India in the last now 72 years. Some of the Indians have been able to sit across the table and talk to us in many aspects. You can look at post-Kargil, talking with General Musharraf, nobody could even imagine. The unpredictability in Afghan leadership is very well known. They make a promise and then they break it. It has many times. Now, in any discussion between Pakistan and Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, the elephant is Afghanistan. Both the country will have to come to grips to an understanding as to what extent each country can influence, because it is not in India's interest. Believe it or not, they have no sympathy for Afghan people or their miseries. They want to keep this Afghanistan boiling, keep it unstable so that it creates problem for Pakistan. Now, Pakistan distanced itself from its policy in the last now 2-3 decades. We want a stable Afghanistan because instability has created immense economic, political and security problem for Pakistan. We should take it as face value. The political and military leadership in Pakistan is on one page stating that we want a peaceful and secure Afghanistan. And we are supporting that the intra-Afghan talks, whatever shape it takes place, has to take place. I'm sure that on today, in the discussion, Pakistani leadership, I think including Prime Minister Imran Khan also met him. He's very forthright, very blunt in his talks. I think he must have told them, yes, you need to talk to the other side also in Afghanistan because you're not the only stakeholder. This is something which is very important. Second thing, sir, regarding what shape of these talks will take place, if you look at the historical context, I can name you two. The United States discussion with the Vietnamese, Lee Duc-Tho and Henry Kissinger, lasted for many years. In 1973, they signed an agreement, but that agreement fell apart in 1975. And look, what happened was that the North Vietnamese, especially the Viet Cong, they overran the South Vietnam. Now, the fear is that since the Taliban control a substantial part of Afghanistan, any agreement signed by them with, naturally, third force will be the Afghan government itself. Would it last? Would it last or not? Because once the American troops leave, or there's a very small part of Afghanistan like that, who are the guarantors? In my opinion, I think the guarantors would be China, Russia, even the United Nations have to be involved in this, so that in the transition period, 2-3 years or maybe, these people will be the guarantors. Because if the United States wants that it can be the only guarantor, the Taliban do not trust them, believe it or not. They are having.
There's a lot of trust.
Why they are talking to them? Because it is the occupation force. And I'll tell you something very interesting. Prime Minister Imran Khan made a very interesting remark at the UN General Assembly, something very startling, very, very interesting. He said that earlier the Soviets were the occupation forces, and later on the Americans came. And he said that people were asking, meaning, what is the difference between the two? Hardly any difference. And that's why he said that we wanted to keep away from what was happening in Afghanistan. And they were blaming us, the Taliban. So, sir, at this time, it's a very delicate situation. Let's hope that the Taliban from Pakistan do not go empty-handed. Let's hope that the
question is, what can we give them? So, if you allow me,
sir,
we've been joined by Hassan Khan Saab, a senior journalist and also an analyst. Hassan Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Faisal bhai, thank you.
I'm good, sir. Thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to us. Hassan, first of all, sir, update us regarding this very important meeting which took place in Islamabad in the Foreign Office, where from the Pakistani side, the Foreign Minister, the Foreign Secretary and DG Sahi were present, and the Taliban delegation was headed by Mullah Abdul Ghani brother. So, in fact, when I went through the story and everything, sir, nothing concrete came out. I mean, general discussion, it seemed that, they have agreed upon bringing in peace in Afghanistan. I mean, nothing tangible and nothing which could pinpoint towards certain issues which have actually become the major problem.
No, I think Faisal, definitely at the moment, too many things will be kept out of the media focus. The reason is that usually such talks, as you know, the Taliban, the US talks in Doha for almost 9 months. I think nothing was shared with the media till the last moment when the agreement was almost finalized. But this time, if you see the joint statement, and the Foreign Office has issued the very last sentence of the very last paragraph, I think that points toward a very important issue that both the parties, means Pakistan and the Taliban interlocutors, agreed that the increase in violence in Afghanistan is detrimental to the cause of peace process, or to the peace process in Afghanistan. So it means that Taliban has also realized that this was the issue when on the September 7, U.S. President Donald Trump scuttled the whole process for the reason that on one side we are talking to the Taliban, but on the other side there is a hike in violence in Afghanistan. So it was, he said that it is a dichotomy in the Taliban's policy. But I think that statement to me is very crucial, that if Taliban agree to the point that increase in violence will will make the peace process difficult. So I think for me this is a very great step. And otherwise, you see another very important development. No doubt, Taliban post after September 7, they visited China, they visited Russia, they visited Iran. But coming to Pakistan, it's a special kind of visit. No doubt, Pakistan government has invited them to come and discuss. But simultaneously, there is a visit of the senior U.S. diplomat Zalmay Khalilzad, who was the architect along with the Taliban interlocutors in Doha of the peace agreement. So both are here. Both will be here for almost 4-5 days more. And I think the tangible result will be definitely if both the parties agreed to kickstart again the peace talks, as I think that was stopped on September 7. So I think that I hope that will come out of it.
Hassan Khan sahab, do you think that the result in the Afghan election would also matter a lot as far as the meaningful dialogue or some concrete result is concerned, sir?
I think this is, Faisal, this is very important. Look, and I have also written about it, that the election in Afghanistan, the main objective of President Ghani was he wanted to go to the people, get a fresh mandate, a heavy mandate, and then prove the Taliban's narrative that the Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, they are the puppet and they have been installed by the foreign forces. So it was a dream of Dr. Ashraf Ghani to go on September 28 and do elections and get a fresh mandate and a heavy mandate. But unfortunately, I think to his misfortune, the turnout is very low. Out of 9.6 million, only 2.1 million almost is so far the Election Commission of Afghanistan has said. Only 2.1 million, almost 20% of people have voted. So definitely this is an issue, and already there is a conflict between Dr. Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah. Both have claimed their victories prior letting the election commission to count the vote. So I think what I believe that Taliban will be the most, I think, satisfied party for the reason that this low turnout, despite the fact that there was a security across the country, 72,000 troops were deployed at 5,000 polling centers. But despite that, the low turnout shows that people have less confidence over Dr. Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah. So I think this is also going in the favor of Taliban, that look, we were saying that these people are not these people are not liked by the people of Afghanistan. So definitely, one, it will strengthen the Taliban narrative. And two, I think it is not the question of legitimacy of the election. I'm not questioning its legitimacy, but I'm questioning its popularity. Dr. Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah failed to get the popular support. No doubt, the election, there is nowhere it is mentioned that this number of, if there is this number of the vote or cost, then it will be legitimate. It is legitimate, but it is not the popular vote for Ashraf Ghani and for Dr. Abdullah. So definitely it will also further strengthen that narrative of Taliban that they are not the true representative of Afghanistan. Otherwise, I think as for the election are concerned, I don't expect that. I remember the 2014 elections, and I see these elections will be definitely have the same fate as in 2014, when none of the person was announced as a winner.
As a winner. All right. Thank you very much, Hassan Khan sahab. Now, sir, there are a few more areas. Now, Pakistan, when I say Pakistan, means the foreign minister has very categorically mentioned that Pakistan has also kept reminding the world not to overlook the hardcore political, economic, socio-cultural and ethnic ground realities in Afghanistan and its immediate neighborhood. Because, you know, when you look at Iran, you look at Pakistan, and maybe in the north side of the Afghan, I mean, there are a couple of countries from Central Asia. Now, sir, when you talk about the political, it is right in front of you. When you talk about the economic, we all discussed that practically they do not even have an economy. So two things are minus: socio-cultural and ethnic. Socio-cultural, yes sir, and ethnic. Now there is a division, sir. About 10% are Uzbeks, if I'm not wrong, 8 to 10%, that's what's said. Then you have Tajiks, then you have Afghan, Pashtun, you have got people from our side, and then people from Hazara also. There's so many, it's so divided in that way, sir. Do you think, sir, Afghanistan, since it has been in a state of war, I would say, since the last 4 decades, 40 years almost, and these things cannot settle down because practically this is the 3rd generation who is seeing the war out there. People fled Afghanistan, few went to Iran, most came to Pakistan and elsewhere also. Now, sir, this bringing in peace, and we're talking about their economic activity, we're talking about their political issues. I mean, after 40 years, don't you think, sir, this is not that easy? It is not a formula that 2 plus 2 is going to be 4. It's a different ballgame altogether, sir. And a lot more needs to be looked into, and I think with a very wise approach. You need to have those diagnostic skills to understand the issue.
Well, primarily the Afghans will have to decide themselves. And no solution can be imposed from outside by Americans, by Russians, by Chinese, by Pakistan or by Iran. The Afghans will have to sit down and agree, and only then there will be peace in Afghanistan. And while he said that it has been 4 decades that they are at war, I'm sure there must be a very strong realization, not just among normal Afghans, but even amongst Taliban, that this cannot go on for an unlimited time period. I mean, 40 years is a
lot of time,
very, very long time for a country to be at war. And I'm sure the Afghans themselves would want their country to be at peace. Even Taliban would want it, that there should be peace and this killing must stop. And I think as long as there is foreign interference, support from whatever quarter, there cannot be an indigenous peace. And when we say, or we have been hearing this and reading this, Afghan-owned, Afghan-led process, but somehow it has not happened in that manner. Because while the Taliban continue to say that the Kabul government is an American puppet, and similarly the Kabul government can continue to say that the Taliban are being supported by elsewhere, and hence the peace is not coming about. So I think the concerned parties, be it the world powers, be it the immediate neighbors in the region, they need to facilitate the Afghan players, the stakeholders, be it the Kabul government, be it the Taliban, be it the ethnic groups, to sit down together and sort it out amongst themselves as to how they want to go about sharing power. While Taliban can continue to maintain that they have had the longest struggle for the last so many years, they have been struggling to liberate their country from foreign occupation. They have had so many sacrifices, hence they deserve to be in power. But that alone is not enough, because it has to be on a proportionate basis. If they are 40% of the population or 45% of the population, that is what is going to give them the requisite share. They have to agree to it. Otherwise, they cannot be acceptable by the rest of the world. While they may be controlling 70% of the territory, it is sheer fear or brute force. It is not popular. Hence, they will have to sit down and agree. And I think the focus of the entire world, whosoever is interested in bringing about peace in Afghanistan, should be to facilitate these stakeholders sit together and agree on a formula, agree on a dispensation which is agreeable to everybody, and hence there is peace. Till then, I think the struggle will go on.
Sir, your take on the same point, sir.
Okay, I think I slightly disagree.
Please go ahead,
sir. The great responsibility lies at US, because US intervened in Afghanistan in order to create the stability and to counter.
The question is, do they want to?
Sorry?
Do they want to?
Exactly. The US need to understand. The US need to understand the prevailing dichotomous scenarios in their foreign policy, in their South Asian engagement. The question of peace in Afghanistan is directly linked to the India-Pakistan relation. I mean, the pair of nuclear weapon states, they are having the disagreements. So the United States is adopting the bilateralism with India and Pakistan. Definitely that is supporting India to increase its influence in this region by destabilizing Afghanistan. So I think the great responsibility lies at US. US need to manage the issues.
The current situation in Afghanistan, do you think that suits India and that suits USA also? The US will have a reason to keep their forces there. The Indians will have another battleground for us so that they can use the Afghan soil against Pakistan to carry out operations in KPK or Balochistan for that matter, or even in Karachi.
But on the other hand, the unstable Afghanistan is creating problem for Pakistan as well. So Pakistan is very much cooperative with China. So United States and India both are on the same page. So they don't like Pakistan to join Chinese. So that's why unstable Afghanistan will be problem for Pakistan.
So another proxy war is going to be fought in Afghanistan.
Definitely.
So you don't see peace coming.
I
there
don't see peace because the United States need to understand the ground realities of this region, because there is a dichotomous behavior of the US foreign policy. Theoretically, they are
The
saying
USA
something else.
is in fact controlling the whole globe, and I'm sure they do understand the dynamics of Afghanistan.
Exactly.
They do understand what's happening out there, but maybe what they say is pretty different from what they are doing out there, isn't it?
Exactly. US is controlling the whole globe, but South Asia is very different from the rest of the politics in the world, because South Asia, two nuclear power, they are the neighbors.
Provided if it matters to the Americans.
And the both are a very good relation with the US. So that's why South Asia is very much different from the.
Yeah, that
from
is
the rest
one of
the
the
world.
reasons that Saudi has opened up so many other arenas, I would say, in Yemen and elsewhere, with Iran and with Qatar and with so many other countries. Let's see where it leads. So last minute in closing remarks.
Let me just make a comment on the elections.
Sir?
Mr. Hassan Khan, is a known expert on this. The elections, first of all, extremely important is the elections have taken place. Unfortunately, what has happened is that a very small portion of the people have voted. The problem is of fear. This is a fear factor, one, that many people did not go, they were threatened. The second was...
Fear was rigging also, sir.
Second one was what has in the last 5 years, these two, colleagues, what you call them, or rivals, Mr. Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, have they given to Afghanistan? Hardly anything. No stable government, no, as you talked about, the socio-economic, like health and education and others. So they had nothing to show on ground for the Afghan people to go and vote. But the important thing is that elections have taken place. Now this is an important, element in the Afghan politics, which the Taliban cannot ignore. That in the last 19 years, there is some sort of a plurality of thought. There is some sort of other institutions which have taken roots in Afghanistan. Taliban can ill afford to do that. I think wisdom should prevail, and the Taliban, while talking to, ultimately they will have to talk to the Afghans leadership inside. Is it Mr. Ghani? Is it Dr. Abdullah? Or any other political parties which have, or other leadership? If they don't like their faces, they don't like them, they have been what you call puppets. There are other people in the party whom they will have to talk. The last thing you said was the Tajiks, others. Let me tell you, sir, this is a rainbow country. I reminded of President Mandela, like Pakistan, it's a federation. The many, the provinces, they are like a rainbow. They enrich the country, same as Afghanistan. The other thing is that Afghanistan, the last 4 decades have suffered. These people, their dignity has been taken away. I think it's time that we should all support for a stable Afghanistan.
AVM Saab, quick comments.
The only ray of hope in the entire scenario is that the Americans want to pull out, or they need to pull out. And they need to pull out in grace. And the grace is that Afghanistan should be left peaceful. Otherwise, it will be a defeat for the Americans. So that is what is the hope that the region has, that the Afghans have. And if we can trust the Americans that they are sincere in this, then they will make all efforts to bring about peace in Afghanistan.
All right, sir. All right, one liner, sir.
The great power, they need to realize the facts of this region. I mean, carrying that theoretical policies very different from their practical moves will pay nothing to them.
All right, thank you very much, Atiq Saab. AVM Saab, was a pleasure, Ambassador. Thank you. Always great to have you, sir. And that's all we have for this week. Inshallah, I'll see you on Monday. Till then, you take good care of yourself.